Eren Yeager refers to himself as a slave to freedom in the finale of Attack on Titan, and that seemed to be upsetting for a lot of people. And in isolation, it does read as a truism. It sounds deep, but on its own, it's really just a thought-canceling cop-out that gives the speaker license to bow out of answering the question. But while I don't love this line because it does kind of share that cadence of being a vacuous, really makes you think platitude, it is getting at a truth that Eren's entire arc is working with. Whether you approve of the term slave being used in this context, and whether you find the use of an oxymoron confusing or frustrating, this is a genuine expression of Eren's tragedy, and it is backed up by the text of the show. Eren is a special kind of determinator archetype that actually doesn't idolize this kind of person. Eren's determination isn't lovable and puppyish, it's clearly poisonous to him and everyone around him. There is very little happiness to be found in Eren's compulsive need to fight. His desire to leave the walls isn't driven by an active curiosity for the world, nor even by a principled notion that all people ought to be free, but by a desire to be free of danger, that an empty world without threat is his birthright. And this drive turns against itself. Eren becomes a metaphor for life itself, and it's a rather dark image. This is what I really love about the ending of Attack on Titan. Eren becomes so much more than a character in a story, really morphing into a primordial concept that the rest of the characters need to face. Every character's story is brought to a breaking point thanks to him. It's hard for me to say that the story even comes to any conclusions ideologically. Eren is no longer a protagonist that gets to make good or bad decisions. Instead, the show fractures off in dozens of directions so that each character has to reckon with the ideas that he provokes in their own ways. For me, this doesn't feel like a thematic statement being addressed because it can't be addressed. Attack on Titan is about how life is fundamentally violent and brutal, and there is no answer to that. It's just horrible. It's a lament. Eren is the furthest reach of Ymir's intention, her will to power, the purpose of her unending life. The two of them are fated to mark the beginning and end of the Age of Titans, but this fate isn't bound to some external sense of inevitability. It's a natural consequence of who these two people are. The future memories that the Attack Titan experiences are a pretty poignant expression of that. Eren doesn't just have visions of the future, he pushes the information he wants his predecessors to have into their minds. Ymir, as Zeke notes, creates the first Titan out of nothing but a natural desire to live.
Life survived for one reason. It had the ability to multiply, to spread itself far and wide. In order to multiply, life had to continuously change its form, to adapt to different environments. It's why we are as we are now. Constantly spawning and expanding and grasping at more. So to make us run from death, life cursed us with fear. Like anyone, she did what she could to escape the suffering that fear brings. She created a stronger, larger, seemingly immortal body. And then she escaped into a world where death doesn't even exist. That's the truth of the founder Ymir. And this is the world she escaped to.
Over the course of a few generations, this Titan, this survival instinct, propagates itself in more and more defined and nuanced ways. Forms that labor, carry things, build, defend, colonize. But in all that, the one that usurps the founder comes to realize the drive inherent to the Titans is the Attack Titan, and Eren specifically. We're told that this Titan doesn't obey orders, and that seems all very epic and in character for Eren.
Each of the 9 Titans has a name to describe it, and that includes the one you're about to inherit from me. Throughout history, this Titan's marched in the vanguard. It has ever pushed forward, seeking freedom. And for freedom's sake, it fights. Therefore,
it's called the Attack Titan.
But the Attack Titan isn't driven by some higher sense of purpose to buck against authority. It doesn't have a rebellious spirit. Its nature is to preempt dangers before they arise. Unlike the others that react to an imminent cue, the Attack Titan foresees danger and neutralizes it, and even crafts opportunities for violence to pave over any rough patches it sees ahead. Eren incites the raid against Liberio, interesting name that, just so he can get his people to destroy them. Because all life seeks its own propagation, it also seeks expansion. It integrates everything it can consume into itself and kills everything it cannot consume before it can be killed by it. The freedom that Eren obsesses over pulls him into a rigid destiny, and that means he doesn't feel free. He's a slave to freedom because no one ever feels free when they're obsessed with something. But that doesn't mean they aren't free. It means that they've used their freedom to make choices in accordance with what they value, even though there are steep consequences for it. The fact that there are consequences doesn't mean that they didn't have a choice. Free will as a philosophical concept doesn't really factor in at all, and the show goes out of its way to direct us away from ontological questions like that. Eren knows the truth, and makes it clear and explicit in his final conversation with Armin. He did the rumbling because he wanted to. We can argue forever about whether there is free will when one knows their fate, but for the purposes of the story, it's irrelevant. Eren used his freedom to create the reality he wanted. He insists several times that he wasn't shuffled down a path, not by his father, and in the end, not even by some nebulous idea of fate. He wants freedom from his enemies. Even his potential enemies are too much for him to allow. It's not his destiny to kill millions of people because it's in the stars, but because of who he is. Was Eren a victim of his desires? The question doesn't really matter. What you want isn't done to you. We are our desires. We make ourselves.
That day, in that moment, Bertolt would have died, but he had to live. So I sent it away from him and towards Mom.
Eren cultivated himself to a far greater degree than anyone in our world can. He chose when his mother died. He killed his father. He chose when his enemies died. He made himself into the perfectly realized form of who he wanted to be. And yet, Eren isn't an island entirely independent of other influences. He was molded by Ymir. He is the quintessence of her existence pushed all the way to its limit. He is an expression of what she values, which is primarily safety. Ymir values safety to a degree that it eventually kills her. Her dilemma makes Eren's crisis in Season 4 seem almost trivial. Eren has to deal with the fact that he is going to do something terrible, but Ymir has to deal with being hopelessly in love with her captor and abuser to the point where she is willing to die for him and then continues serving his descendants in the afterlife. Ymir is literally enslaved, which I imagine is why some people find Eren's slave to freedom comment to be so tone-deaf. So let's not compare Ymir with Eren. These two are fundamentally different. The progenitor and the apex, different species. A more appropriate comparison, and one the show itself makes, is between Ymir and Mikasa. Mikasa loves someone who will never love her enough to put her well-being before his own goals. Her love for Eren is far more a source of agony for her than it is a source of happiness. Throughout the series, you just want to grab her and tell her to have her own damn personality, goals, and opinions. Her devotion to Eren is almost mindless, to the point where she is susceptible to believing that it may just be against her will. But again, Attack on Titan doesn't really believe in wanting things against your will, and we're given a pretty clear indication that Mikasa has her own reasons for loving Eren.
Our studies do indicate the Ackerman bloodline carries some odd quirks, powers that activate when their survival instincts are triggered. But this theory that she's reflexively guarding her host? To be honest, it seems a little far-fetched to me. I think it's far simpler than you're making it, Eren. There are straightforward explanations for all the behaviors you're describing that have nothing to do with genetics or conditioning. She doesn't slaughter Titans out of some inborn compulsion to keep you alive. She does it because she adores you.
And they're very self-motivated reasons. Eren saved her life. For a scared little child, developing an attachment to her hero is a good survival instinct. However, this incident with Eren killing Mikasa's kidnappers is recontextualized in an interesting way later on. While this may have been a good thing for Eren to do, and it may have come from a place of good intentions, it becomes far more informative of Eren's character rather than just being a formative memory for Mikasa. This little kid had the mental ability to kill several adults, not even in self-defense, but a premeditated attack that could have gotten both children killed. Good or bad, it's troubling. And yet, it's very natural for Mikasa to consider this event from a different angle. She doesn't think about how disturbing it is for a little boy to seek out that kind of violence, because it's very much in her best interest to idolize that violence. Ymir had a similar experience. King Fritz can either use violence to harm her, or benevolently choose to withhold violence. As the one who can cause or prevent harm, she immediately loves him. And this instinct sticks. Even after becoming the single most powerful person in the world, certainly comparable to Mikasa's strength as an Ackerman, she continues to cling to the one who provides safety. You can only imagine this becoming more complicated as she suddenly becomes revered and taken care of as a person with inherent political power. It was probably a more comfortable life than the one she was living as a prisoner of war. This flowers into a desire for love and recognition and connection, but these are natural consequences of a far more primal drive to assimilate into a body that can sustain life, which is what happens when she becomes a vital political tool for the Eldians. I find it fascinating that this basic drive to live results in a goal that she is willing to die for. Protect the king that protects me, even if it kills me. Isn't that the grandest irony of being alive? That we are at our most noble and fully realized when the drives that give rise to our existence are turned against themselves? When we cannibalize our own essence? I always thought it was interesting that pure titans don't really eat humans. They don't digest them for sustenance. They literally incorporate their own progenitors without the ability to make use of them or process them. Similar to a primal drive that becomes a self-defeating goal, a desire for life that inevitably kills you. Eren concludes Ymir's long life with the same fundamental irony. A drive that gives birth to desires that cannot sustain their intentions. A desire for freedom that can only be realized when every person he loved is forced into committing acts that they don't want to do, including killing him. This is further fleshed out with Eren's mirroring of Reiner. Reiner's goals completely obfuscate what he wants, so much so that he literally has to make another personality to accommodate his bifurcated drives. He wants love and recognition and respect, and the way he intends to get that is to rise in the ranks of his army and inherit one of the Titans. But he starts to get the kind of adoration and affection he needs from his peers in the Cadet Corps. What's a literal child supposed to do? Not develop a second personality that allows him to bask in a sense of belonging and unconditional love for the first time in his life? Reiner's closest, most fundamental desire is turned against him as his commitment to his goals begins to fail in helping him achieve what he actually wants. Becoming a warrior did absolutely nothing to get his father's love, and his mother still thinks that he would be more valuable to her as a Titan with only 13 brutal years left to live than as a simple human being capable of living a long and happy life. By contrast, Eren really isn't doing anything as warm-blooded and sympathetic as making himself worthy of love. The show goes well out of its way to make it clear that Eren is psychologically pure. He has no trauma. Nothing bad was ever done to him because nothing was ever done to him that he did not want to happen. He's not dealing with a mental health crisis. Every step in his development is carefully and lucidly demonstrated to him. Armin teaches him to want freedom, and also that defeating a monster requires one to become a monster. Historia teaches him that he needs to do what he wants, even at the expense of other people's lives and desires. That's why Armin tells Eren that he's going to hell too. Eren uses his guidance to eventually become the leader of the apocalypse. Eren's drives and desires are meticulously shown to be a blank slate. Obviously, no such person exists in our world, But Eren has been crafted to be that person so that the natural proclivities of life itself have an open stage to perform on. Eren is life, according to Yeager.
In order to multiply, life had to continuously change its form, to adapt to different environments. It's why we are as we are now. Constantly spawning and expanding and grasping at more.
Eren's role in this metaphor is developed further by his proxy confrontation with the Rhys family through Gisha. By this point in the story, Karl Fritz and his successors have been portrayed as frail, self-flagellating liberals that are more interested in their slow, penitent death march than in protecting their own from a continuous onslaught by the Marleyans. They're anemic, useless, and self-righteous, yet still elite, enjoying all the safety and decadence of being royal without taking on any of the personal risks. They don't believe in actively making the world better, far better that they all just die. And that's theoretically fine, I guess, but they're willing to bring down countless other people with them. Gisha initially wants to kill them because he wants the power to save his wife and kids from getting murdered. Seems pretty fair, right? Pacifism can be extremely costly, and so those that are unwilling to pay that price on behalf of the impotent royal family kill them.
For ages, we who've inherited the Attack Titan have bucked the authority of any who sought to control us. And I've finally come to understand why. We're meant to oppose the self-righteousness of the king.
The pacifism of the Rhys family is shown to hold intrinsic violence. Hiding themselves away only to be crushed by an aggressor feels like an illustration of Zeke's description of life. Yes, people can be pacifistic, but that means that they will be wiped out and exploited when a stronger body feels threatened. A peaceful nation would be colonized and destroyed by a violent one, so the argument goes. There is no cure for violence, because it's as intrinsic to life as sustenance. Now, far be it from me to assume that there are political implications in this show about racialized violence, but I do feel a bit uneasy about the way the show chooses to express itself. Isayama likely has some right-wing beliefs, and may even be a fascist, according to some of the implied commentary in the show. There is a glorification of the military, and a kind of right-wing populism at play in the way the royals are portrayed, both the real royals and the false king that we see get overthrown in the coup d'etat. There is also reason to suspect that Isayama doesn't believe in the war crimes perpetuated by Japan during World War II, at least in Korea specifically, though so far as I know, this is unconfirmed. You see parallels between the Eldians living in Marley and the Jews living in Germany in the early days of the Third Reich, wearing armbands, living in ghettos, sure, but also an oppressed diaspora people who need to be kept down because of a perceived threat. That's kind of anti-Semitism in a nutshell. We're always that powerful menace with ancient beliefs, connected by some transnational power, usually money. We survive through cunning for the moment, but tomorrow, who knows what kind of power we might reveal. Is it any wonder that Isayama's titans are made of water and earth, like a golem crafted in a moment of distress? Isayama does seem to be intentionally evoking the imagery of 19th to 20th century European anti-Semitism, but I personally think that there is a bit more nuance in his portrayal than an outright neo-Nazi would use. The oppression against the Eldians is shown in pretty brutal detail, so when Gisha and the other Eldian restorationists begin conspiring against the government, you're like, yeah, they should do that. There's a pervasive belief among white fascists that miscegenation and illegal border crossings and the very concept of transness are attempts by the Jews to destroy the white race as payback for the Holocaust. And while that is stupid and false, I don't know two Jews who can agree on the best way to assemble an IKEA gazebo, let alone coordinate white genocide. Can we at least agree that doing a Holocaust is the kind of thing for which you should expect revenge? How did you foresee this playing out exactly? Disembodied personification of white fascism? Surely you didn't think you were literally taking all of us out, right? We're a religion, we have converts, and we don't even evangelize. People just like us for some reason. The great, terrifying power of the Titans, to me, harkens back to acts of Jewish resistance in classical antiquity. The Maccabean revolts, the Jewish-Roman wars. Jewish violence is almost always a reaction to oppressors who want us to compromise our religious beliefs. I see, you're gonna let us keep our temple if we put one of your idolatrous gods inside. Interesting. We'll let you try to fuck off before we kill you all or die trying. How's that? The Abrahamic world thinks the Jewish God can just unleash plagues if you fuck with his people. As the progenitors of the Christian and Muslim faiths, one might associate the older faith as being somehow connected to the most awesome and terrifying power in the universe. There is a very palpable fear of Jews that I think one could conceptualize in the way people fear Eldians. It's not just a racial power, but a transcendental one, a celestial one. And so, I have to wonder about the response. Both the real-world response to the threat of Jewish vengeance, and the Marleyan response to the Eldian restorationists. It seems obvious to me that spending your energy making your potentially very strong enemy angry is a bad strategy. Why not befriend them? Isn't that safer? Isn't that the goal of international relations, to maintain safety? Well, surprisingly, there are a lot of dead German men who disagree with that. We're gonna focus on two. Friedrich Nietzsche, yeah, that guy again, and Carl Schmitt, a Nazi. Because it's important to hear out people of differing opinions. The Jews say one thing, the Nazis say the other thing. We gotta listen to both sides of the argument. We're going to home in on one particular part of Nietzsche's writing in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, called The 1001 Goals. The saint is extolling the virtues of peoples, as distinct from states, and he says that peoples are at their greatest virtue when they are exemplifying the utmost values of their specific group. Crucially, the things that they value must be distinct from any other group, and almost ineffable. These virtues, which used to belong to peoples, now belong to persons, individuals with egos. Now, this progression from peoples to persons creates some tricky nuances, in my opinion, and this is most relevant when Zarathustra refers to the archetype of the enemy. One's enemy is not someone to fear or even despise. A person's enemy is their whetstone, someone to withstand. In fact, a friend makes for a pretty good enemy. When a person has an enemy, they collide. There is a kind of violence between them, one Nietzsche doesn't exactly describe in literal terms. What kind of violence is this? Well, if you're a Nazi, like Carl Schmitt, it's not the violence of words. By the way, Carl Schmitt was literally a Nazi. I'm realizing that people might... He was a member of the Nazi Party, is what I'm trying to say. Nietzsche's enemy is someone who disrupts one's conversation with themselves, forces one to reflect on hard truths and embrace difficulty. Carl Schmitt's enemy is a literal political entity that we need to kill. It's a universal necessity, and liberal ideas about diplomacy, institutions that can bring literal violence into the realm of discourse is just not feasible. Peoples, nations, need to fight. In the way Nietzsche dislikes states because they effectively take over the burden of individual growth into a monolith, Carl Schmitt disliked utopias because they deny something inherent to being human. Essentially, all states are nanny states. In point of fact, I don't know how closely Nietzsche's ideals relate to Schmitt's. I can only possibly tell you how I interpret his work. Is his enemy the same as Carl Schmitt's enemy? Maybe. Nietzsche believes that peoples hold beliefs that contradict each other because each one has a distinct will to power. None are correct or incorrect, they are simply true because they are the destiny of the earth. Is it therefore the destiny of all peoples to be in constant war with their enemies? Will diplomacy and conversation and reasoning always fail to stop violence? Is avoiding violence even a virtue to a human being? The nation of Eldia is a people. They have a bounded fate connected to the coordinate, a point outside space and time that connects them all to one ultimate source of truth. And there is that ineffable goal, or will to power, projected by Ymir that her subjects have to struggle to understand and realize. The fact that Eren is the one to make this realization, when Ymir herself literally cannot speak for herself, makes me feel that he is somehow a representative of that indescribable destiny. Think about the shabby thought process that goes through Eren's mind as he slowly comes to understand his fate. He winds up touting this strange, oxymoronic idea of freedom, but it almost feels retrospective. It begins with an overwhelming drive to kill all the Titans, until he learns that he is one. So, who the hell is the enemy then? He doesn't have one. The enemy is anyone it needs to be in order to have a fight to fight. I really can't understate how beautifully tragic this ending is to me. There is virtually nothing happy about this conclusion. Sure, we get to enjoy the fact that some of our favorite characters are alive, though most of them are pretty sure they're about to die in their last scene. But truly, the only happiness to be gleaned from the ending, if you can even call it happiness, is in getting to fully experience complex feelings about the inevitability of violence. How often do we really allow ourselves to feel the cruelty inherent to just being alive? We notice it and then immediately try to shut down the feelings it evokes because we're sophisticated people living in the 21st century, and we know that violence is wrong, and one day we'll totally get rid of it. And yet, I think we all kind of suspect a little bit that this kind of thinking is broken. Violence may not be a bug. It may just be a feature. That feels wrong, not just cruel and brutal, but illogical. So we cook up plans for a better future. That's a good thing, by the way. Try to change the world, even if you suspect it's impossible. Make that your will to power. But I really appreciate the way this show gives me free rein to just dwell in that darkness. Every facet of being a living human is allowed to be exactly as grim as we suspect in our darkest moments. Even safety, freedom, love, devotion, kindness, selflessness, knowledge, they also get to have dark roots and dark fates. It feels so ancient and dark, yet somehow inescapable and right. This video was brought to you by me. You're welcome. I think about stories a lot, almost constantly. I'm not sure where I am right now. Point is, if you're writing a story and you need some help, you can hire me. I consult on screenplays, write serialized fiction, and yes, I write scripts for YouTube professionally. That's right, you're looking at a pro. You can go to my website to check out my portfolio, read my reviews, look at my prices, and reach out about getting a hand making your project.